Hi, guys. We are back live with Women Who Do. It has been a couple of weeks. I hope everyone out there watching has been well. And I'm so excited to be sitting down today with Jeriana San Juan. She is the lead costume stylist for the Halston show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So anyone that is joining us for the first time who might be watching from Jeriana's side, Women Who Do is a show that's, truly dedicated to Ann Klein's message. She was all about putting your best foot forward, especially as a woman in the workplace. So this is truly about connecting, sitting down with women who are making a difference today and really learning their story and what inspires them. So thank you so much, Jeriana, for joining us. To just start us off, could you tell us a little bit more about kind of how you started your journey in styling and costume design? Like, is this something that you always wanted to do? Like, why costume design?
Well, costume design to me was an expression of fashion design that was more oriented towards character and storytelling, and I think that's where I always found myself leaning in terms of fashion design, and so it sort of felt to me like a pretty natural transition. I just always was infatuated with clothes and the power of clothes, the sort of transcendent power of clothing, and how much clothing can tell us about a person. And though I am always sort of finding myself motivated by the aesthetic of clothes and how they come together, I think I always sort of was seeking uh, further motivation in fashion design, really about the person I was dressing and expressing their personality and sort of meeting a moment that told us about the character and told us about the moment and had sort of a story to tell.
You worked as the costume designer for, Netflix's miniseries Halston. What was that experience like? I mean, it was I think I watched the whole thing in a day. It was so good.
Well, I'm so glad. I mean, I think
Mhm.
the experience of making Halston will be one that I treasure for the rest of my life. It was such a unique project. It was such a gift, and I was able to collaborate with an incredible director, Daniel Minahan, incredible production designer, Mark Ricker, of course, Ewan McGregor, um, and so many more. Rebecca Diane, who played Elsa Peretti, Krista Rodriguez, who played Liza Minnelli. There are so many wonderful collaborators that came together to make this project that made it, I think, so special. But it was a really fantastic marriage of fashion design and costume design. And it was sort of the perfect opportunity, I felt, to be able to illustrate sort of the glamour of fashion and the fashion world, and specifically to illustrate Halston's voice in that fashion world. And also really be able to take this character of Halston, the person Halston, through a journey of his life and be able to illustrate that was just monumental. So when I was, finding a way to sort of frame Halston's clothes, it was quite often about creating a contrast or a juxtaposition to a surrounding environment that would feel really particularly rooted in a certain time.
I know you designed over 1,200 outfits. That is
Yes.
that like, how long did that take you?
Probably more than that at the end of the day. I think, you have to people don't really understand sometimes when I tell them that yes, all the characters that talk, definitely, that's all me. I've done all the costumes, but also beyond that, every single person that graces that screen, background person eating lunch at another table in the restaurant, the servers, you name it. Every person walking through Central Park as Halston is walking through Central Park. So it's really about, painting the whole canvas and every single person gets dressed. I probably had about a month and a half, 2 months before my official start date for the show because I was in the middle of starting up a pilot actually, which I did. Um, between Plot Against America, which was another HBO series that I designed, and Halston. So in that time, I took every possible opportunity to start on the research phase of it all and really kind of immerse myself not only in Halston's work, but in every bit of visual fashion reference that I could get my hands on to really, I think, for myself, kind of set a tone and a palette for what the 60s would look like versus the 70s versus the 80s in terms of Halston's point of view and how and what the fashion world around him would look like. And that was everything from researching the contemporary fashion designers who were, designing, right alongside Halston, whether that was, Oscar de la Renta or Bill Blass or Ann Klein or any of those people.
I mean, when you were doing some of your research on Ann Klein, what were some of the things that you learned or any, like, great key takeaways?
Well, I think Anne Klein, she touches our story at Versailles because, her
Mhm.
clothes were shown at Versailles. And when I really looked into Anne Klein, I really found myself just completely fascinated with this woman who was Anne Klein and just her incredible, like, fortitude and resilience and strength being a female fashion designer in the time that she was. Um, the fact that she was battling cancer when Versailles Fashion Show happened, the fact that Donna Karan was her assistant and was pregnant when they were at Versailles. I mean, there were so many great specific nuances to her story, and specifically where her story was right at the time when we were going to be telling her story in Versailles. So I just really found myself wanting to, I think, specifically highlight her artistry and her particular voice and her particular sort of aesthetic sense, and also, pay homage while also trying to do it dutifully. And I think by dutifully, I sort of mean as authentically as possible, trying to use some of the same kind of hats that are documented as being in her runway show at Versailles. She had this really fantastic jumpsuit that was more of a bodysuit, and which is documented in the little bits of footage that do exist from Versailles. So I wanted to recreate that, use some of her signature kind of safari shapes, and also her signature prints. She had some great, like, giraffe prints and some very great exotic, animal prints. So using some of that just to kind of illustrate her voice as kind of loudly and specifically as possible.
Not only were you obviously, like, lead costume designer, but you also played a role in, helping to train Ewan McGregor, to play, the role of a designer. So what
Yeah.
were some of the things that you taught him? What did that look like?
Well, I think that, yeah, so I did train you in somewhat officially, somewhat unofficially. I
Mhm.
think we both kind of, when we met, just sort of realized to each other kind of how much symbiosis need to happen in order
Yes.
for me, who had done all of this research in sort of the evolution of his aesthetic, what influenced him as a designer, what fabrics he was interested in, what design-wise was sort of his motivation in creating his signature voice as a designer. And Ewan had done, a great amount of research as well, watching footage of him, watching the way that he, physically, held his body or walked, and the way that he kind of referenced models and clothes with his hands, which were always very dancerly. And also his background and his story of how he grew up and everything. So we sort of shared that all initially, and just kind of were like two little peas in a pod, just kind of just completely sharing with each other everything we'd known and learned about him. And then when we started to talk about sort of like just tactily how, he inhabited his own character because he really was, Halston. Halston was a bit of a character. It was Roy Halston Frowick playing Halston. So we kind of shared in that process not only how he would set himself apart visually and how Halston himself actually did that, whether it was wearing monochrome red or wearing his signature black turtlenecks or however we were going to do that, but also how does this character physically manipulate fabric and move through a workroom and operate in a fitting. I mean, there's some knowledge there, which is just as sort of tactily specific as how does a paintbrush, how does an artist hold a paintbrush. We started to kind of connect a lot of those dots together, and I would show him, how to adjust something on a model and how to pinch silk and how to manipulate silk as opposed to muslin, and how to pin on a life model so that you don't actually injure them. I never thought pinning was such a hazard. We need a sponge person to pin, but he was so game for it, and learned, how to manipulate a pin, how to be handed a pin appropriately from another person. All those things you think of so silly and such minutia, but it actually makes a huge
Yeah.
difference, I think. And he went far beyond that, even wanting to know how to physically sew on a machine, and um, and how to, put seams together, how to pin a seam appropriately. So he was a great student.
I also just want to say major congratulations. That's huge. You were nominated for your first Emmy for your work on Halston's Versailles episode. Like, I can't even imagine. How does that feel?
It feels pretty great. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I am still very humbled by it. I think it's wonderful to have to feel acknowledged in that way by peers and by people who I admire. Really does mean the world to me, and it really means that I think it helps kind of validate on some level. So I feel like I'm doing something right, but it does feel great. I was very, very pleased with the nomination, and look forward to many more.
So, one final question that I always like to ask everyone we sit down with is, can you tell us a little bit more about the women in your life that inspire you?
It's been interesting, I think, growing up with two women as parents, two women who are both very career focused, who are very motivated, who are very loving, who are very smart and fierce and warm and loving. And so I've had really wonderful models of women in my life, and find myself every day kind of wanting to be that woman, be that leader, and that warm, fierce, creative, powerful woman for my own daughter. Because we need role models, and it sort of feels like the more we normalize following your dreams, and for example, what I do, even, my husband ends up staying home more with my daughter as I'm out working, and just to have that normalized is feels really wonderful. I mean, it wouldn't have been this way probably, you know 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So it feels really good to have that normalized, and for my daughter to grow up seeing that too, seeing that, mom's, working on location, but she's kicking butt and she'll be home soon.
Well, on that note, Jeriana, thank you so much for your time today. I feel like I need to go now sit down and rewatch Halston so I can pay extra close attention to how the fabric was cut. I think that my textile class at FIT was like my lowest grade, so maybe I'll retake some of those tests.
Well, enjoy the second watch. There is a feast for the eyes, so you'll see something different every time.
Exactly. Well, when you know about your next project, or not know about it, but can share more about it, let us know. We'll be on the lookout.
Okay, awesome. I will do that.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.